Hey folks, welcome to Ballyhoo Creations, and this is the video tutorial for the Jessie doll. Jessie is also known as Mrs. Santa Claus. She has a plain back, an applique apron on the front, would be really cute with your favorite printed fabric. And then she has her embroidered face with glasses, and she uses faux fur for her hair. In this video, I'll show you how to add pipe cleaners into her arms, and that way you can kind of get her into different poses so her arms aren't always up, like in the hands up position. You could also use a stronger wire if you want to, and I have other videos showing dolls that do that, but in this case I'm going to use some just easily available pipe cleaners. Jessie can be stitched by your embroidery machine in 3 different hoop sizes, 5x7, 6x10, or a 7x12, depending on how big your hoop is. You can make different sizes. And she's got the boxed corners on the bottom so she can stand on her own. So let's jump in and start stitching the head. We'll start out by hooping some medium cutaway stabilizer, and then color number 1 gives us a placement stitch that's stitched onto the stabilizer, showing us where to place the fabric. And stretch fabric is recommended for the head design. That way you can stuff the nose and get a nice look there. The stretch should go across, like from cheek to cheek there. And then go ahead and stitch the tack down, place a little bit of water-soluble topper, and then go ahead and stitch the face stitches. Then you can remove the topper. I've done the white, black, and red stitches here, and then I'm stuffing the nose from the top of the head. That gives her a little more character. And then we can go ahead and stitch on her glasses, and those are optional. You could skip the glasses if you wanted to. And then it's going to give us a placement line for her hair. So I'm going to use some faux fur and make sure that it covers all those placement stitches from the hairline to the top of the head. The machine will go ahead and stitch that down for us, including a part in the middle. And then we'll go ahead and trim that away from her face. Sorry, my big fat head got in the way, so I couldn't show you the cutting part, but you just trim it away, and I'm removing the extra fur here with a tape roller. And whenever you're cutting faux fur, make sure that you just cut the backing and not the fur itself, and then its back piece goes furry side down, and the bottom of the fur needs to line up with that horizontal line of your placement stitch. And then we go ahead and put the skin fabric on top, and it overlaps that fur hair by about an inch. And then we stitch the seams. These are double stitch seams for the head. And we're done stitching the head. Let's go ahead and put the head together. First we're going to cut it out, and this video has been sped up, so you don't need to cut this fast. This is the back side of the head. If you flip this over to the front, you'll see that the placement lines give you a cutting guide. But this particular instance, I'm going to show you just using about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you're using stretch fabrics is fine. Now that the head's cut out, we're ready to turn it right side out. You just reach in through that back flap and flip it right side out. Very simple. Go ahead and press those seams, get your hair kind of cleaned up. If you have any weird pieces of hair sticking out of the side there, you could always trim those away. And the neck stem stays inside of the head, and you want to make sure, this is pointed out in the instruction document, that you stuff both front and back of that neck stem. So I'm putting some stuffing in the front where the chin area is, and then a little bit more in the back behind that neck stem. And that way the head won't flop either forward or backward when you put it on the body. And after that's done, you go ahead and stuff the head normally. You can make it as firm or as loose as you like. I tend to like the head stuffed a little more firmly. And because we're using stretch fabrics here and we didn't put stabilizer across the back, that means that this fabric is going to stretch out a little bit, and that'll give the head more of a realistic shape instead of just like a pancake shaped head. Now I'm just checking to see if there's any empty spots, and I see the cheeks need a little extra filler. And this is all personal preference. You can stuff them however you like. Once the head is stuffed, we tuck that skin tone fabric underneath the hair fur fabric, and then we go ahead and pin that in place. You want to make sure that that skin tone fabric is tucked in as much overlap as you can get there. Just kind of tighten that fabric up. Now we're ready to close that back flap, and you can either glue that with a fabric glue, or in this case I'm going to use a needle and a strong thread. You can use upholstery thread, button and craft thread, a hand quilting thread. Those are all stronger than your regular sewing thread, so that when you pull on it and get these closures stitched up tight, the thread won't break on you. So I do recommend a strong thread whenever you're doing hand sewing on a doll or a stuffie. I'm also using a doll needle. This is a 3-inch long doll needle. It's much easier than using a little short needle. I'm going to use a ladder stitch here, and the ladder stitch does have a diagram in your instruction document so you can see the direction of this stitch. But it's a pretty simple thing. You take about a 1/4 inch stitch on one side. I'm going to do the skin tone fabric first here, doesn't matter. And then I go straight up and do another 1/4 inch stitch on the opposite side, on the hair side. And you just keep going back and forth. And you want to have as much of a vertical when you cross from the skin tone to the hair. You want to go straight up and straight down with that thread. And when we pull that tight, it'll give us a nice, almost invisible seam. And again, I've sped up this footage so you don't have to watch the slow process of hand stitching, but you do get to see all the steps. Now that this doll has been stitched all the way from one side of the head to the other and it's all closed up, I'm going to go ahead and tie a knot. And I have a special trick for that I'll show you. I'm going to put this kind of on the middle here instead of the edge, but go ahead and take a stitch, very small stitch, and then don't pull it tight. Go ahead and hold the loop in your right hand and pass the needle through, and make a new loop on your left hand. Pass the needle through that loop. So 2 loops passing through, and then use the needle to hold those loops up and pull the thread so that the knot goes right on the surface of your doll head. And then we insert the needle, come out a couple of inches away, and when we pull that thread tight and clip it right at the surface, that thread will disappear into the head and you won't see any thread tails. That's a nice way to finish any doll or stuffie. So the head's done. She's looking so cute in her little red glasses. I'm showing you what's called the pin trick. I'm using some T-pins, or any kind of pin will work here, and I'm putting them between the inner and outer frame of the hoop. And this is to make sure that that stabilizer doesn't slip, because when we put that applique apron on, there's going to be a lot of stitches. So we want to make sure that everything lines up. You want to hoop some no-show mesh stabilizer or some other light, maybe even medium cutaway stabilizer here. Go ahead and put that in your hoop, and then run color 1, which is the placement stitch, showing you where to place the fabrics. Then I'm laying my body fabric right side up to cover those placement stitches. And the next stitch we'll do a tack down, as well as a placement showing us where the apron needs to go. Then you'll want to lay your applique apron fabric on top of those stitches, showing where the apron is. Go ahead and run the next color, which is a tack down stitch, to hold that apron in place. And then get you a good pair of applique scissors, or maybe a curved pair of scissors, and go ahead and cut as close to that tack down line as you can, and remove all the excess fabric from outside of the apron. Once you've got the fabric cut away, you go ahead and put it back on and run the applique border stitch. This is a satin stitch, and it will go all the way around and cover up those cut edges. And then you take your back body fabric face down and then cover that with another piece of stabilizer, and we run the seam stitch that goes all the way around the body and leaves an opening for turning and stuffing. Now that the body's stitched, we're ready to cut it out and Same as usual, if you have a non-fraying fabric like a stretch knit, a fleece, a felt, something that doesn't unravel, you can cut a very small seam allowance, about 1/8 of an inch, which is what I'm doing here. Parts of this body assembly are sped up, so don't worry if you're not working as fast as I'm showing in the video. I don't work that fast either. A word of caution, if you are using thick fabrics, like I've got a couple of layers of fleece and a layer of scuba fabric in there, they're very thick, you need to use very sharp scissors and go very carefully and slowly. You don't want to cut yourself trying to cut through those thick layers. A reminder to always clip the inner corners, which we have at the neck, under the arms, and around that turning tab. Make sure you get close to the seam line without cutting it. Now we're ready to turn her right side out using a long pair of hemostats and putting the tip of the hand in the jaws of the hemostats, and then by pinching at the top in the hand area, just slowly pull that down and get the body into the, get the arm into the body. Do the same thing on the other side, and I notice there's a little bit of extra fabric that's going to make it harder to turn, so I'm going to clip that off. The more bulk you have in those seams, especially around the hands, the harder it's going to be to turn. And these can be a little frustrating. That's actually why this is considered an intermediate project and not a beginner, because of some of these small parts to turn right side out, especially with the smaller dolls and thicker fabrics. And I want to show you how to box the corners on the bottom of this doll. You don't have to do this, but it does make it sit nicely and stand on its own. So I'm going to open this up so that the side seam and the bottom seam kind of kiss each other on the inside and make a corner. I'm doing that on both of the bottom corners. Just lining up the side and the bottom seam to have a little triangle there. And I'm going to measure, and it depends on which size doll you're doing. You could do anywhere from 1/2 inch to even 1.5 inches. This is kind of personal preference. For this size doll, this is the large 8x12 hoop. I think I'm doing a full inch on this one and just marking a line. So I've taken my measurement, marked a line, and you can stitch this on a sewing machine. That's actually recommended, but I'm going to show you it can also be done by hand stitching. Just a straight line, a few stitches, that's all it takes. I've even done this with fabric glue, and that works as well. And then once that corner is secured, some people like to cut off the corner. In this particular case, you don't even need to do that. You can leave it intact. And then once we turn it right side out, it'll be a square corner so the doll will stand nicely. And once both of those corners have been stitched into that boxed shape, then you go ahead and turn the doll right side out. And we've already done the arms earlier. And you see how those corners now have that boxed appearance. So it forms a rectangle. And when we fill that with a weighted material like pellets or even gravel or something like that, the doll will stand nicely on its own. It's a good idea to push out the seams to make sure that you don't forget any areas when you're stuffing. I use my hemostats for that. I'm going to show you how to use a foam hair curler. This is from the dollar store. Any kind of foam will work that will fit into the neck area, and I just use 1/2 of a foam curler for this, plus a pipe cleaner. And I just poke the pipe cleaner through that foam curler right where the arms are, bend the edges down so that there's no sharp pointy bits. I go ahead and I like to twist. This is personal preference. You don't have to add these in at all. I just like the arms to have a little bit of shape to them. And then again, any kind of tape, I like to use electrical tape whenever I'm doing a wiring in a doll, and I just tape that around the sharp edge of that pipe cleaner to make sure it doesn't ever poke through the fabric. These are not intended for children to play with. You wouldn't want to give something with a wire inside to a small child especially. These are meant for home and holiday decor, so I don't mind putting a wire inside. Just skip this step if you are planning on giving this to a child. Again, hemostats are a indispensable tool for doll making. I recommend anybody who tries to make dolls just get a pair. They help you out so much. Normally I would use some kind of fiber fill to stuff a doll, and that is certainly an option, but I decided to stuff this with all of the extra bits because I'm trying to conserve fabric and not be so wasteful. And then in the bottom, I'm using some glass beads. And then also, this is a bag that has some of those plastic pellets in it, which I'd already had, so I just decided to use that instead of free pellets. But something like pellets, a small aquarium gravel, maybe some heavy glass beads like I'm using here, or marbles, and then stuffing all at the top of the doll. That will give it a nice structure at the top, but weight at the bottom so it will stand on its own. If you notice any floppy bits that might keep it from standing up straight, go ahead and add extra stuffing for that. And then just tuck that tab, that turning tab, tuck that inside of the doll. And I'm going to pin this together, and we will hand stitch it shut using the ladder stitch, just like we showed on the head. She's almost done, but she needs to get her head on straight. And because we've got that foam curler inside of the neck area, it's fairly easy to just scrunch it on there. A little bit of twisting, that'll get her head on where you want it. And then on this particular doll, let's use the ladder stitch again to attach the head to the neck. There are other ways of attachment. If you look at the Chris doll instructions for the Santa, he has his head where it can still swivel. In this one, her head will not be able to turn after we've stitched it on this way. It will be nice and secure though, so this is just an alternate method. If you have another way you want to attach the head, feel free to use your own way. So that's it. Jessie's all finished. Hello, Mrs. Claus. She's going to go up on the shelf for some holiday decor. I hope this video was helpful for you, and if you have any questions, you can contact Ballyhoo Creations at ballyhoocreations.com. Go to the website, and you will see a Contact Us at the top menu where you can send me a message, or you can go to Facebook, and we have a Ballyhoo Inspiration and Support group on Facebook where you can post your question there, and either myself or one of the nice people in the group will help answer your questions. That's all there is for this doll. Thanks for watching. Have a great day and happy stitching.